My name is Danielle, though later I would choose to call myself Emma. And this is the story of how I buried the girl who was obedient and trusting, and became the woman who learned how to burn bridges and never look back. For 5 years, I lived like a shadow, evenings spent in crowded classrooms, scribbling notes under tired fluorescent lights, days spent working, budgeting, saving pennies like they were jewels. I denied myself new clothes, vacations, dinners out. I told myself it would all be worth it when the moment came, when I would walk across the stage in a cap and gown and finally hear my name called with the title I had fought for, a master's degree, a dream I had chased with every ounce of patience I could scrape together. I had saved $31,700, every dollar accounted for, every sacrifice measured against the vision of my future. I kept that number written in a small notebook by my bed, the total circled like a promise. That money was supposed to be my celebration, my security, the proof that I had made it through the storm. The day before my graduation, I logged into my account. It should have felt like opening a treasure chest. Instead, the numbers glared back at me like a cruel joke. $71.24. That was all that remained. I thought it was a glitch. I refreshed the page. I checked again and again. But the screen did not change. My savings, my years of sacrifice, my hope, gone. I could not breathe. My chest tightened. My fingers shook. I whispered aloud, "No, no, no," as if denial could bring the numbers back. The truth arrived in the form of 2 messages. The first from my mother, sent from Santorini, where she was sipping cocktails on a cliff above the sea, her words carved into me like a blade. "No one cares about your degree." The second was from my brother Nate, a thank you, not for my years of sacrifice, not for being there, but for $30,000. He wrote as if it were a gift I had gladly given him, as if draining me dry was nothing more than a family favor. I stared at the screen and felt the world tilt. The betrayal was almost too heavy to lift. But I was not only a daughter, I was not only a sister, I was the trustee of the Carter Family Trust, the one my father had left behind, the one I had always managed carefully because he believed I was the responsible one. And in that role, I had keys to doors they had forgotten I could open. When I pulled the records, the truth was sharper than any nightmare. 6 weeks earlier, my mother had transferred $18,000 from my account into hers. Nate had pulled $12,800 under the guise of tuition, a loan he never intended to repay. They had not even bothered to cover their tracks. They knew I would find it. They simply did not care. That was the moment something inside me broke, and something else was born. I was done being their puppet. I was done being the silent, invisible caretaker of their mistakes. If they thought I would swallow this betrayal like every slight before, they had no idea who I was about to become. I closed the laptop, wiped the tears from my face, and whispered a new name to myself, Emma. She would be the one to finish what Danielle had started, and Emma would be the one to destroy them with their own greed. When the shock finally stopped rattling my bones, grief thinned, and something colder took its place. Not rage, not panic, precision, a blade honed on the years I had swallowed my voice. I reminded myself who I was, not just a daughter, not just a sister. I was the trustee of the Carter Trust my father built with care and clauses, the quiet spine behind every account they treated like a family purse. They mistook me for a clerk. They forgot I held the keys. I opened my laptop. First National waited like a door with many locks. I breathed in, breathed out, and turned the tumblers. My brother's loan appeared first, a swollen line of debt with my mother's neat name beside his as co-signer. I clicked through disclosures my father had insisted on when no one was listening. Then I pressed the command that turned open water into ice. The loan froze. Access halted. Interest began its slow, relentless climb. Next came the joint account, a familiar bucket they dipped into for dinners and flights and handbags that photographed well in foreign light. I moved every dollar into a separate escrow under my authority. I locked it. I canceled every automatic payment that made their lives glide. I cut every card that tethered them to my work. One by one, the green lights dimmed to gray. I leaned back and watched the screen reflect in the dark of the room. Click at click, I had pulled the cord from their perfect vacation, not out of spite, out of order. My father's order, the one they had trampled because they believed I would never use it. Then I called the bank. My voice surprised me. It did not shake. I explained that funds earmarked for education had been diverted without consent. I described irregular withdrawals from the trust. I requested an internal audit, a fraud review, and legal holds on any account tied to those movements. Policy paragraphs slid into place like well-cut stones. The manager's tone shifted. "We will act," she said. I thanked her as if we were discussing the weather and ended the call with hands that felt newly mine. At dusk, I opened the shared cloud they never remembered to secure. Santorini sprawled across the screen. White steps, blue domes. My mother's whine lifted toward an impossible sky. My brother's grin tilted toward a girl whose dress cost what a month of my life had once cost. And then, little chimes began to land like hail. Payment declined. Card rejected. Please contact your bank. Their messages hit my phone in a fast, messy chorus. Questions, then offense, then heat. What did you do? Fix this now. Do not be dramatic. I read each line the way a doctor reads a chart that can no longer surprise her. Before I blocked them, I sent a final sentence. You took everything. Now you have nothing. Then I placed the device face down and let the room be quiet again. Guilt tried to edge in through a crack. I closed the window on it. This was not vengeance for sport. This was balance. The kind my father built into the bones of our finances because he knew love turns careless in the hands of people who never had to earn it. I wrote notes while the evening settled. Timestamps, account numbers written out in words so they would live beyond a screenshot. Names of staff, ticket references, a clean ledger of what I had done and why, not to convince them later, to remind myself that clarity is a duty when you are the one who holds the pen. Before sleep, I stood at the sink and let cold water run over my wrists. The woman in the dark window did not look like prey anymore. She looked like someone who understood the quiet geometry of power. Pressure here, release there. Doors shut, doors opened. No shouting, only structure. I turned off the light. In the dark, I could almost hear my father's careful voice. Use the rules if they break the trust. Do not wait for a fire to ask permission to become water. I was done asking. I had become the water. Morning came like paper, thin, ready to hold ink. I brewed coffee, opened my laptop, and stared into the bones of the accounts. Not just balances, but transfers, memos, trails of misuse they thought no one would ever follow. I called a forensic accountant, the kind who tracks numbers the way others track footprints. I gave her what I had, screenshots, bank statements, the clause my father wrote into the trust, misuse without consent suspends all rights. She listened. She did not offer sympathy. She offered process. Send everything, she said. Fraud hides in the margins. I built a folder, clean, relentless. Transactions printed in words, not digits. The trust document, my father's signature steady as stone. The messages that cut me open and hardened me. My mother in Santorini, no one cares about your degree. My brother, thank you for 30,000. Timestamps, location tags. Facts, not emotion. The first report came back quickly. 18,000 siphoned 6 weeks ago into my mother's account. 12,800 drawn by Nate as tuition, with no receipt, no class, no school. And the sharpest cut, trust money funneled into vendors for Nate's wedding. The wedding I had not even been invited to. Education savings turned into flowers and champagne. I asked her for a timeline, a clean ledger with every turn mapped, because motive whispers, but timing shouts. By afternoon, it was in my inbox, cold, undeniable. Funds leaving on the same day as final arrangements, transfers to a travel concierge 2 days before my mother's flight to Santorini. No tuition anywhere. only indulgence. The ache rose, but Emma, my new self, closed the door on excuses. This was not desperation. This was theft. Calculated, brazen, unrepentant. I called my attorney. Together, we drafted an affidavit. I am trustee. I did not consent. I discovered the misuse the day before my graduation. I acted under the authority my father gave me to preserve his intent. We built exhibits like bricks in a wall, the trust with its claws of teeth, bank statements annotated in ink, screenshots of messages stripped of anger, left with time and place, the forensic report tying money to vendors, receipts to roses, theft to faces. By dusk, the petition was ready. Suspend secondary beneficiaries. Confirm my authority. Recognize this as theft, not error. A motion for an emergency hearing. I signed my name slowly, pressing the pen hard enough to leave an impression. Not Danielle's timid signature, but Emma's, steady, unflinching. That night, I checked the shared cloud one last time. New photos of Santorini. My mother's glass raised high, my brother grinning toward a horizon that was no longer his. I did not feel hatred. Hatred cost the same as love. I chose a different currency, accountability. Before bed, I laid my graduation gown across a chair, not as armor, but as a reminder. They had stolen my savings, my ceremony, but they could not steal the work, the degree, the truth. I turned out the light, and in the quiet, I heard my father's voice the way you hear the ocean in a shell. Trust is not a feeling, Emma. It is a structure. Use it. And I would. The next morning, the storm began. I woke to the vibration of my phone. Buzz after buzz. Message after message. Not from friends, not from colleagues. From them. My mother's name flashing again and again. My brother's too. Calls, texts, voicemails. Each one more frantic than the last. But I did not answer. Instead, I opened the shared iCloud account they had forgotten I could still see. At first, the photos looked like postcards, whitewashed walls, blue domes against the Aegean sky, sunlight on glasses of wine, my mother's face tilted back in a laugh, Nate posing like a king beside the sea, and then the shift. Screenshots of notifications. Declined. Transaction failed. Please contact your bank. Their paradise was breaking apart in real time. A dinner bill that refused to process. A boutique purchase blocked. Hotel charges suspended mid-trip. The joy in their photos bled into confusion. Then anger. Then panic. I scrolled through their frantic texts. What did you do? Fix this now. This isn't funny, Danielle. And then, the one that made me almost laugh. You're being dramatic. Dramatic. As if freezing the trust was a performance. As if taking back what was mine was theater. I read their words and felt nothing. No guilt, no fear, only clarity. Before I blocked their numbers, I sent one final message. You took everything. Now you have nothing. I pressed send. Then silence. My phone stopped shaking. My chest did not. But the tremor was not fear anymore. It was release. That evening, I sat by the window with tea cooling in my hands. For years, I had been the one patching leaks, smoothing edges, keeping the Carter name clean. Every mess they made, I absorbed. Every debt they created, I managed. Every fire they lit, I put out. Now, for the first time, they were standing in their own flames. And I was finally watching from the outside. Through the cloud, I saw them trying again and again. Card swiped, declined. Card tapped, declined. Nate's face pressed into a scowl in one photo. My mother's hands raised mid-argument with a waiter in another. The world they had built on my back was crumbling with every beep of denial, and I did not lift a finger to stop it. I closed the laptop, leaned my head against the glass, and let myself breathe. It wasn't triumph I felt. It wasn't even joy. It was balance. The scales had shifted, and for once, they were not tilted against me. That night, I dreamt of my graduation stage. But this time, there was no empty account. No stolen savings. No mother's sneer or brother's grin. There was only me, walking forward, claiming what was mine. When I woke, the teacup still on the sill, I realized something. I no longer needed their applause, their approval, their permission. I only needed this, the strength to let them fall and the courage not to catch them. I knew emotion alone would never win. Tears do not hold up in court, but numbers do, timelines do, documents do. So I called the forensic accountant again, the one who had traced the first steps of their theft. Her voice was calm, professional, already moving faster than my grief. She asked for everything, every receipt, every message, every scrap I thought might not matter. Fraud hides in the smallest margins, she said. I spent hours compiling the evidence. Bank statements printed in long columns, my father's trust instrument, his steady signature beneath the clauses, the one line that burned like a prophecy. If funds are misused without the trustee's consent, all secondary beneficiaries can be suspended. It was as if my father had known this day would come, as if he had built me a weapon long before I had the courage to use it. The accountant's report landed in my inbox. Clean, cold, undeniable. 18,000 siphoned into my mother's account. 12,800 pulled under Nate's name as tuition. No bursar records, no classes, no intention of repayment, and then the sharpest wound. 30,000 tied to wedding vendors, florists, caterers, a band that cost more than a semester of school, my education stolen to pay for a celebration where I wasn't even invited. I printed the report, each page heavy in my hands. I highlighted, annotated, underlined. Not because I doubted the truth, but because I wanted to feel its weight. Proof doesn't just speak, it crushes excuses. With my attorney, I prepared the petition. We built it like a fortress. Exhibit A, my father's trust, with its iron claws. Exhibit B, bank statements marked in ink, arrows tracing theft to indulgence. Exhibit C, screenshots of their messages, stripped of emotion, left with timestamps. Exhibit D, the forensic report, every dollar accounted for. Exhibit E, the vendor list from Nate's wedding, reconciled against withdrawals from the trust. Together, the story became undeniable. Not carelessness, not confusion, theft, deliberate, calculated. We filed for an emergency hearing. The judge would decide whether my authority as trustee should be enforced immediately, whether my mother and Nate would be stripped of their rights, whether the money would finally be safe. I signed the affidavit slowly, not Danielle's hesitant hand, but Emma's. Sharp, certain, permanent. That night, I allowed myself one glance at the shared cloud. Another photo had appeared. Nate, jaw tight, his card declined again at some glowing restaurant. My mother, her face pinched in anger, holding her phone high like she could shout the screen into working. I looked at them once, then closed the app. They were no longer my concern. What mattered now was the truth I carried. Not just for me, but for the father who had trusted me with his legacy, for the girl I had been, who believed hard work and patience were enough, for the woman I was becoming, who knew that proof is stronger than pity. I placed the gown I would never wear to my stolen graduation back into its box, but beside it, I laid something greater. The report, the petition, the affidavits, my new armor. Tomorrow, I would walk into court, and this time, my name would be called for something no one could take away. Morning came in courthouse gray, fluorescent light, cold benches, a clock that ticked like a metronome set to steady my breath. I arrived early with a slim case, the trust instrument, the timeline, the report that turned pain into proof. My attorney sat beside me, calm as stone, worn by water. We did not rehearse. The truth does not need choreography. Across the aisle, my mother walked in first, Santorini tan, fury blooming along her cheekbones. Nate followed, restless, phone in hand, eyes already scanning for exits. He did not look at me. Neither did she. Shame is a strange thing. It keeps the chin high and the gaze low. The judge entered. A presence more than a person. Wood creaked. The room stood. We sat. My attorney rose and began where all stories should begin, with the structure. Your Honor, this is the Carter Family Trust. This is the clause the settler, my father, wrote with intent and caution. Misuse without the trustee's consent suspends beneficiary rights. Here is the appointment of trustee. Here is my signature. Here is the timeline from discovery to action. Plain, spare, impossible to soften. We laid the exhibits one by one. Not drama, only sequence. Statements with clean annotations, screenshots with time and place. The forensic report that mapped every dollar from scholarship hope to wedding flowers. The vendor list that matched peonies to payments, table linens to withdrawals, a band to a semester. The room breathed differently as the pages turned. Even paper can carry a kind of gravity. My mother's attorney spoke of confusion, a misunderstanding, a family matter that did not belong in court. He offered words like slippery stones, oversight, mix-up, we intended to repay, as if intent could be borrowed after the fact, as if apology could be stapled to theft and called even. Nate's lawyer tried swagger. Tuition, he said, a plan to return funds when his startup closed its next round. He named investors like talismans. He offered an email with the subject line tuition, typed by Nate himself, as if a label could turn water into wine. The judge did not blink. When it was my turn, I did not raise my voice. I stood, I said my name, I said my father's name, I said I was the trustee he chose. I said I did not consent. I said I discovered the loss the day before the graduation I had paid for by starving joy and choosing work. I said I acted to preserve the corpus, the intent, the dignity of what he built. I did not ask to be believed. I placed belief on the table in the form of paper. Silence held for a moment longer than comfort. Then the judge began to speak. This is not a misunderstanding. This is misappropriation. Not an accident, a pattern, calculated, exploitative. Her words landed with the weight of gavel even before she lifted one. She turned pages. She quoted lines. The clause with teeth. The dates that rhymed too perfectly with flights and florists. The absence of any tuition ledger anywhere. She spoke of fiduciary duty. She spoke of trust as structure, not sentiment. And then she ruled. The court recognizes the trustee's authority, effective immediately. Secondary beneficiaries are suspended. All distributions are frozen pending further order. The trustee, me, assumes full and exclusive control of the remaining trust. Nate is ordered to repay the $30,000 taken under the pretense of education plus interest within 90 days, or the court will authorize levy and seizure. Accounts linked to the misappropriation are to be frozen forthwith. Compliance to be verified by the bank within 72 hours. Her voice did not rise on any word. It did not need to. My mother shifted in her seat. A small movement like someone remembering gravity exists. Nate's jaw worked like he was chewing a stone. His attorney touched his sleeve. "Let it go," his eyes said. "But men like my brother do not let go. They only plot new doors." The judge dismissed us with a final line I would carry for years. Family may forgive. Courts do not. A trust is a promise to the future, not a purse for the present. Outside, the air felt brighter than the sky. My attorney squeezed my shoulder once. Not celebration, acknowledgement. We walked down the steps together and then I stopped, put the case against my hip, and let myself breathe all the way down. My phone buzzed with notifications from the bank. Holds confirmed, accounts frozen, orders received, a structure humming back to life. I sat on a low wall and called the only person who would have understood, the version of me who still answered to Danielle. I told her what the judge said. I told her the trust was safe. I told her she could stop apologizing for the audacity of wanting a future. In the soft place behind my ribs, she answered, "Thank you. We can rest now." Rest, then move. I bought a coffee and walked the long way home. For once, I allowed myself to look at shop windows without calculating what I could not afford. I was not here to spend. I was here to witness a city that felt possible again. That night, I placed the court order on my table like a centerpiece. I touched the embossed seal the way you touch a shoulder in passing. Then I put it in the folder with the others. proof that could stand even if I could not. Sleep came without bargaining. No doorways, no waiting rooms, only the quiet knowledge that the ground beneath me had stopped shifting. Tomorrow, I would deal with what came next, accounts to reconcile, distributions to redesign, locks to change in my life and in my mind. But tonight, I let the word stand on its own feet. Protected. After the ruling, I thought the story might end there, but greed has a way of leaving breadcrumbs, and Nate, he had left me a feast. In the files I pulled, there was one document buried under layers of carelessness, a PDF labeled Plan B. His handwriting in digital form, his arrogance preserved forever. Line after line described exactly what he would do if I discovered the theft too soon, how he would funnel what remained of the trust into a business account, how he would bury it in the scaffolding of his startup until no one could pull it back. He wrote it like strategy. I read it like confession. I sat at my desk, the document glowing on my screen. I did not rage. I did not cry. I simply attached it to emails addressed to the people who needed to see it. The IRS, the State Fraud Bureau, the venture capital firm he had been courting for his next round of funding. I did not need to embellish. The file spoke for itself. The response was swift. The IRS froze his accounts pending investigation. The Fraud Bureau opened a formal inquiry into his transfers and shell companies. And the firm, the one that had once shaken his hand and promised him millions, withdrew its offer and placed him on a blacklist whispered across the valley. His empire crumbled in a week. No runway, no capital, no second chance. I watched it unfold from a distance. News alerts, screenshots sent by acquaintances, his name, once paired with promise, now linked to investigation. Through the cloud, I saw him back in the States. No Santorini sunsets, no champagne. Only gray skies above a warehouse where he now worked shifts to pay the interest he owed. My mother fared no better. Her cards frozen, her access denied, the world she built on appearances collapsed. No more designer bags, no more sudden trips. She sold jewelry, pawned heirlooms, begged lawyers who could not conjure miracles out of theft. For the first time, they stood in the cold they had left me in for years. And me? I blocked the last of their numbers. I brewed tea. I read by the window. I let peace take up space where pleading used to live. It wasn't triumph I felt. It wasn't revenge burning hot in my chest. It was something quieter. Balance. Freedom. I whispered to the girl I once was, Danielle, obedient and hopeful, "We are safe now. We do not need their permission. We do not need their applause." And for the first time, she believed me. When the dust settled, I chose to disappear from the ruins, not to hide, to begin. I no longer answered to Danielle. That name belonged to the girl who waited for love that never came. I signed papers, enrolled in classes, and introduced myself as Emma. Emma, the woman who chose herself. Harvard had extended an offer once before, an acceptance I had tucked away because money and family made it impossible. Now, with the trust secured under my control, I opened the letter again. I sent my reply. Yes, I will come. I packed not with sorrow, but with certainty. A suitcase of books, clothes clean but simple, and the resolve to never again ask permission to belong. My mother and Nate tried, of course. Letters arrived with pleas disguised as apologies. Promises of repayment, of reunion, of family dinners where we could start fresh. But I had learned what fresh meant in their language, a new chance to drain me, to shrink me, to erase me. I returned one letter only, a single check, made out for $1. In the memo line, I wrote, "What you thought I was worth." Then I closed the door for good. At Harvard, I walked halls lined with stone and light. I raised my hand in classrooms where voices carried like music. I sat across from professors who asked for my thoughts, not my silence. Each day, I stitched myself back together with the thread of my own effort. Each night, I slept without waiting for footsteps outside my door. The degree came, not stolen this time. Earned, stamped, mine. Work followed. Banks called. firms called. They wanted the woman who had seen greed naked and survived it. I became a consultant, steady, unshaken, unwilling to excuse oversight when oversight was theft in disguise. I built a scholarship in my father's name with the sale of Nate's beloved car. Girls in STEM received the money he once believed belonged only to him. Every award letter I signed felt like a promise delivered. Nate works in a warehouse now. Pallets, forklifts, the weight of debt pressing down. My mother lives small, stripped of the plastic glamour she once wore like skin. They do not write anymore. They do not call. And I do not look back. Sometimes in the quiet, I remember the stage I never crossed in my first graduation, the empty chair, the gutted account, the messages that told me I was nothing. And then I remember the court order, the scholarship letters, the Harvard hood laid across my shoulders, the peace in my chest when I whispered, Emma. My name is Emma. I was once Danielle, the obedient daughter, the forgotten sister, but I buried her when they stole my dream, and in her place, I built someone stronger. I do not need their applause. I do not need their forgiveness. I need only this, the life I chose, the name I claimed, the freedom I refused to surrender. And if you ask me now what revenge looks like, I will tell you. It looks like peace. It looks like balance. It looks like walking forward, head high, never once turning back to see if they notice I am gone, because they never expected me to rise. But I did, and they will never see me coming again.